Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube as Speaking Podcast. We also have the Awakening Podcast, the Meditation Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, and the Crypto Podcast, and all can be found on Rycon.com. Today, my guest, who has some Irish connections, but is in Philadelphia. Please welcome Kristen Donnelly.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. So you might let the audience know. Who's Kristen?
I would be delighted to. So hello, audience. My name is Dr. Kristen Donnelly. I am an empathy educator, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, and a TEDx speaker and obsessed with curiosity. I'm also a business owner. My brother and I are the second generation owners of our family network of companies. And then within that network, I own and run my own division with my best friend, Dr. Erin Hinson, and we call ourselves the good doctors of Abbey Research. We teach empathy as a intellectual way you move through the world, a kind of a mindset to commit to understanding how other people see the world is really what it comes down to. We say it's more mental than emotional for a whole host of reasons, and it's fed by curiosity. And so what we do is help people get curious about themselves and the world around them, hopefully, so we can all human together a little bit better. And I did, in fact, live on the island of Ireland for about 5 years. My PhD is from Queen's University, Belfast. And that's actually where I met Dr. Erin. Both of our PhDs are from Queen's. And then I also happen to be married to a Northern Irishman myself. So I claim Irish adjacent status. I have no Irish blood myself, but I do love that island with my whole heart. So,
excellent. So it's nice to have the name too of the good doctors, because unfortunately, there's plenty of the bad ones out there. So
there certainly are.
So I suppose let's go down the speaking route first, because I want to delve into what you're doing. I know that you've done a TEDx, but
yes.
And obviously, being a doctor, you'd be competent speaking as well, because you're used to patients and everything. But what were you like as a child?
Sure. So just really quickly, we're doctors in that we're PhDs. We're not medical doctors. So just to clarify that for anyone listening, my medical training comes from watching many years of ER. So I don't think you want to be seeing me as a patient. What was I like as a child? I was a chatterbox even then. The first time I spoke in public, I was 3. And I was playing a lion who was present at the birth of Jesus. So in my church, nativity play. And I've been speaking in public ever since then. There's a huge joke in my family. My niece is currently 18 months old and does not stop talking. And there's been lots and lots of both loving and not so loving comments about how she takes after me. And that's, so yes, very, very, never met somebody who wasn't a friend, loved telling stories, loved getting to know people. I've been that way forever, much to, I'm sure at times, my parents' chagrin.
No, very good. So I know you've done a TEDx, and I believe you've got another one planned for October. So yeah. You might let us know how you got about getting the TEDx and your preparation for it.
For sure. So I'm actually heading into doing 2 in October, which is insane and an incredible privilege. So I've done 1. My first one was in May of 21 in South Lake Tahoe, California. And then my subsequent ones will be in Long Island, New York at TEDx Farmingdale, and in Chicago at TEDx Chicago. How I went about getting one is I applied. So there's lots of ways to get on a TEDx stage. The 2 that kind of barrel down is you can fill out an application, or you can be asked by the organizers. So TEDx means an independently organized event. So every single one is different. I've filled out, upwards of 20 applications at this point now, and every application is different. The only thing they have in common is they ask you, what is your idea and why are you the one to spread it? Everything I've gotten asked for videos, I've gotten asked for resumes, I've gotten asked for none of those things, but everybody wants to know the idea and why you're the one to work on spreading it. So my path is, I did a 2-day masterclass with a woman named Trisha Brook called The Art of the Big Talk. And in that, she kind of gives you all the tools that you need to apply for a TED stage. And I thought, well, I mean, I know how to apply now, but I'm not even sure my idea is ready. And I'd really kind of like to take this to the next level. So then I joined one of her master classes, and then I started working with her one-on-one. And in that process is how I narrowed down my idea, which for my first TED Talk was that we have to stop tolerating each other and we have to start welcoming each other instead. And I nailed that down. And so I was selected to the first TEDx I ever applied to, which was South Lake Tahoe.
So how was your preparation for it? How much work did you do?
So Roy, so much work. So I am not a memorized speaker when I do workshops. I love audience interaction, and even my keynotes, I'm not scripted. I have an outline. Nearly everybody does, but I really like interacting with the audience. TED needs to be memorized. So my first TEDx was 18 minutes and I memorized it all. And I worked with a coach to even understand choreography. When should I move on the stage and when shouldn't I? And my coach would tell you that I had this like bag of verbal tricks I had been using for a long time, and that she had to get rid of quite a few of them. So it was a lot of work and a lot of stuff, lots of memorization tricks. There's lots of tips about like, record yourself and listen to yourself a lot. That doesn't work for me. What works for me is literally just saying it over and over and over again. So I printed out the script once I wrote it and it was locked and all the edits were done, carried it with me everywhere. I remember reading it in the hair salon. I read it like in traffic, like, if we were in it, I read it everywhere. And then by the time I got to Tahoe, it was like in my bones. Like I knew it to just talk like I was having a conversation. But I'll tell you, I'll be really honest. The mechanics of the preparation were not as challenging for me as the mindset work. And I think if I had been told entering into a professional speaking career that the mindset work would be the most challenging, I wouldn't have believed you, or I would have thought that I was already fine. Like I liked speaking and I made a living doing it. And I did a lot of workshops and I was in academics for a long time. It really can't be that different, right? It can't be that different. I'll be totally fine. Holy Batman monkeys. It was so different. I had to do so much mindset work to understand that not only was I allowed to be on that stage, I was wanted on that stage, and I didn't have to earn them. I didn't have to tell the self-deprecating jokes that I normally tell. I didn't have to do any of the song and dance. They were in that particular audience. They were there because they wanted to be and they wanted to hear the ideas. And so the event itself earned them. And that's when I really truly began to understand how different audiences are in a deep and true way that I hadn't really understood before. And so much more of my preparation now post TEDx is preparation regarding how do I serve the audience best? Not just what jokes am I going to tell? How am I going to show up? Are they going to think I'm really cool? Which was definitely some of my stuff before the TEDx. And now it's all centered on how do I serve them best? Do they need me to earn them? Do they need me to build rapport, or are they going to give it to me automatically because I walked into the room as a PhD and they are an audience that values that? Or are they an audience that is going to be innately skeptical of the fact that I'm a 30-something white woman with a PhD, and therefore I have to prove my humanity more than my qualifications? What does that all look like? And that's a lot more work for me than writing the script. Writing the script is easy. Memorizing was a ball egg, but not impossible, just annoying. The mental work of being ready to show up as excellently as possible, that's the work.
Excellent. And just curious, because I'm not sure how many pages it was, but did you read one page over and over till you had that, or did you just go from start to finish constantly? What was
both? I did both. So I usually did the full script. So the one in Tahoe was 8 pages. The one that I'm in the process right now as we speak of memorizing Chicago. I'm finalizing the script for Farmingdale. So I'm memorizing Chicago, and that's about 4 pages. So I'll read it twice. I'll read it at least 3 times every day through soup to nuts, start to finish. And I always do that on my feet. I do it like full where I'm supposed to be moving. So my body and my mouth both get the muscle memory. And then the rest of the day, what I usually do is not even a whole page. I pick paragraphs and make sure that I have those paragraphs completely down. And then I'll start doing transitions. And I'll also identify pretty quickly, here are the transitions that are a problem for me. What mental mnemonic device do I have to use to get me from point A to point B? And how do I do that? Because the thing with TED in particular is how I build an argument within a TED Talk for me is completely different than how I build it in a keynote. And so I have to make sure that I don't fall into that much audience interaction, because this thing needs to live in a different way on YouTube. And so I'm very aware of that. But I have to do both to be able to content, because there's some things that come really naturally. And so I'm just like, we're fine. And then there's other paragraphs that like, holy cow, I spent a whole day on 2 paragraphs for Tahoe because I just couldn't get the transition down. I just couldn't remember why I was going from point A to point B. And once I figured out the trick in my brain to make it go, when I watched it back, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't, because I was like, oh, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to do something. I'm so glad I didn't. I'm glad I just made it work in my head, because out loud, it's a seamless transition and it works really, really well. But in my brain, I couldn't make it square.
And do you know how many times you did repeat it prior to doing it?
Oh, wow. Great question. I should start keeping track. I was really terrified of my first TED. And so I started rehearsing it daily, like 6 weeks out, which is long for some people. And we've got to be in the thousands. It's got to be in the thousands. Yeah.
And when it's done, then do they like, because I know it doesn't go out straight away, but when it does go out, do they expect you then to be trying to promote it? Because they don't really promote it. It's just like if it just gets momentum. So it's up to you then to kind of share with your social media and friends to hopefully that gets a bit of traction.
Correct. Yeah. And so this is where when people ask me like, what's my biggest tip for giving a TED, I always say, get a coach if you're financially able to, because navigating the waters of this is always a little bit weird. It's just its own beast. So I've been very fortunate that I am working with a coach who has gotten, I think, like over 40 speakers on TEDx stages. And she's very used to like how we do this and how you promote and what goes on. So she's given me a whole plan. And my one from Tahoe isn't live yet. I'm checking it's any day now, it's imminent. So my first thing every morning is checking the YouTube channel. And once that happens, we've got a plan that I'm really excited to see how it unfurls. To release it out into the universe. But especially, I'm incredibly proud of the talk. It's the best performance I've done to date. And because that's what a TED is. It's a performance more than any other speaking engagement I've ever done. It is a soup to nuts monologue that you are just your own character. And so it's the best one I've ever done. And I'm excited to share it with the world, because the message I find to be very, very, very important. But it would have been a little bit more mental work if I wasn't so proud of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, I nailed it. Let's get it out there. There's nothing for me to be ashamed of. So it's yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, send a link as soon as it's done so that I'll make sure that it'll be in the show as well, the show notes, and I put it out on the the Facebook page as well. So
thank you. I certainly will.
Yeah, no, because I normally would look at the TEDx, because I've seen other stuff that you've done, and I was looking and I was doing a search. So yeah, that's good. I was so no, I'll make sure I'll do that. So with Keynote, so what's the difference? And I mean, obviously you've mentioned that you're connecting with the audience, you're finding out more about the audience after doing that, but just what's your structure and how you kind of, I mean, I'm hoping you don't spend 1,000 plus times, but I know people, I mean, I understand why it's your best speech, because I mean, I would never in a million years do that. I mean, I just don't have the patience to do it that many times. But I know that through competitions, because I've got into like the final in a competition of 5 countries, and I know that just by doing it in front of other clubs and just getting feedback and everything, looking at the difference from the start to the end, it was like, so I can imagine, because you have practiced this so many times, you had the coach, and you've obviously were probably doing it in front of people as well, just getting the experience. That's why it gets better. Unfortunately, we can't do that all the time because time constraints.
Yeah, so in terms of a keynote, I've got, really, I give about 3. Those are about the ones that people ask for. And then there's little tweaks in every single one, whichever one they pick. So I talk about, and they can be as a keynote or a workshop. They're pretty flexible topics. I can take them anyway. So one of the things that I talk a lot about is unlearning why we are so exhausted as people. And especially as North Americans, talking about the fact that our cultural value is productivity. And we have to stop being human doings and reframe to be human beings. But that's an unlearning process. It's not just changing your mind or doing anything else. It's an active unlearning. So I talk about that. I talk about the importance of facing trauma head on as a community, and also not comparing it when people share it with you. So reframing how we talk about trauma, how we don't say anymore, that's not a big deal, you're overreacting, you're being a child, or, you know, that's not as bad as you think it is. And instead we just learn to hold people's pain and work it through together, rather than minimizing somebody else's because you think it's silly. It doesn't matter what you think, it matters what they think. And so I do a lot on that. And then the final one is encouraging people to see diversity differently, which is a lot of my TED Talk. And that because we've pretended that diversity is a goal we can achieve instead of a reality we already have, we don't know how to interact with each other very, very well. We've been told to just tolerate difference. Well, it doesn't really how it works. We instead have to understand it. And so I really work on helping people understand that diversity is more than just Black people and white people in a room together. It's the whole totality human experience. Every room you're in is diverse because every human is diverse. And so how do we reframe this understanding to move forward better as humans? So it's those three categories. Different organizations are going to want different nuances. They're going to want different things. And so some of the stuff that's very important to me is to really connect with the local community. So if I'm in, and I'll say I cut my teeth doing that when my first job out of college was as a sexual health educator in Northern Ireland. And I went around to different secondary schools every day and taught them about consent and respect. And I learned really quickly that one of the ways that you, as me with the American accent, keep a room full of teenagers engaged is to prove that I know their town, but I don't know it too well. So like I would make sure in my opening statements to like ask around, and now it's a lot easier. Thank you, Google. In 2005 was a little bit more challenging, but like, so what's the tuck shop they all go to right after school? What's the name of the local sports thing? Things like that. So I do that on a bigger scale. If I'm in here in the United States, if it's American football season, I will make, references to that. If there's, if I'm in town and there's a big arts festival happening, I'll say something about that. And so that's a big part of it. I'm also significantly more pop culture. I'll make a lot of jokes about Marvel's Avengers and things like that in keynotes that I don't make in TEDs because they don't have to live forever. Keynotes are much more of the moment. And I don't believe in lecture-based keynotes. So like even within my keynotes, you're going to be doing group work. Like you're going to turn to the person next to you and ask a question and talk it out. And those kind of things are going to happen. So that's some of the major differences. I have more room to be specific with a keynote. TED has to be entirely universal because you never know who's going to watch it and where. But a keynote, the point is the people in the room. The point is that conversation that they're having. And so I do what I can to bring my points, what I'm there to serve them with, in Congress with the rest of the conversation they're having. And we do that with our workshops as well. Like you order a set one and then we always tweak it, and we tweak it in the room. If I'm looking out and I can tell people aren't understanding, I'm going to stop and be like, okay, let's unpack that a little bit further. And I'll throw in another example and those kind of things. I've been talking about all of these things for about 20 years. And so getting up on my feet and just talking about them isn't a challenge. So we have that organization system to make sure we hit the points and we argue the way that we want to, but we and I say we because Erin is the same, but when I'm alone on the stage, I can go where the audience needs me to go. That's not the case for TED. So you are completely correct. I do not memorize my keynotes. I probably have done thousands of hours on them, but not in a rote memorization. Fact, I've done thousands of hours of research on how to teach these things the best.
And I'm just curious, when you were talking to the students in Northern Ireland, because I'm Irish and I struggle sometimes with the Northern Ireland accent. I think it comes second after Scotland. So did you have any issues with the understanding?
Well, no, and I actually got a pretty good ear in that there's according to linguists, like 36 distinct dialects in that part of the world. Like it's really, really, so I can tell when somebody's from Ballymena or somebody's from Dungannon or somebody's from Derry. I definitely, the accent I have the most trouble with on the whole island is Kerry, to be honest. I have a harder time with a Kerry accent, with like a West Kerry accent that I do with anything up north. But there's times like my parents can't understand a Derry accent. Like when they came to visit, if we go to Derry, I have to translate for them, for sure. But no, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble. And some of that is because I was endlessly fascinated by it. And I was fascinated by the slang words that the kids would use. And I'd have to learn the different, it was just, I'm a giant nerd. So I just felt like this, eavesdropping sponge everywhere I went. Okay, so what do we use this word for here? And even now, my husband, who's lived a lot of different places and not just Tyrone, he's also lived in Los Angeles and Dublin and now Philadelphia. So we're both kind of verbal mutts, because I've also lived in Texas and Kentucky, and England, and so we're kind of all over the place. But he'll say something, I'll look at him and be like, "Pardon?" What was that word? What did you just say? And I have to have him unpack it. But it's fast. So, and sometimes if his dad speaks really quickly, I struggle to understand his dad. But most Northern Irish accents I can get away with pretty okay, to the point where I'm very comfortable making fun of Rory McIlroy for not really having an accent anymore. So.
Very good. And I don't know, do you notice it? Because, because I'm living in Poland, when I meet somebody that has either been in the UK or anywhere in Ireland, I nearly know where they've actually worked, because they pick up the slang, like in Cork, we say like, and this kind of, we're singing, as you mentioned, Kerry is different, even though it's the county next to Cork, but you probably the same. If you come across somebody that have been there, you nearly go, yeah, I know what part you actually, were working.
For sure. I can tell when somebody's been, definitely between Belfast and Dublin. And then I can tell Dublin from the rest of, from the countryside. That's pretty easy. And then, when I listen to the BBC, which I still try to do because I miss it, I can usually pick out the accents of where they are, even on the British mainland. Like I don't have Aberdeen and Glasgow separated in my brain, but I can tell if it's North or South Welsh, because those are definitely different. And, I can generally tell a couple of the pockets of London. And, but yeah, no, it's very easy because of the slang words, and which is why I throw so many people off. And I'm constantly like, so where did you live? So.
It's actually strange for Ireland, for such a small country. I think it's like 5 million now, the population, that you have so many different accents, and they are massive difference.
Massive difference. So it's when people say oh, can you do an Irish accent? I'm like,
what part?
What do you want, the Lucky Charms leprechaun? Do you want me to sound like I'm an extra in the Commitments? Like, what accent are you going for here? But definitely I can approximate Belfast, like a very typical working class Belfast accent, for about 4 lines, and then I sound ridiculous. But for me, so much of accents is the cadence. It is the way the sentences move rhythmically, and that is generally the same on most of the island. So it's how the vowels change, but the rhythm doesn't change quite as much as the slang and the vowels do.
It's fascinating when you kind of think about it and go,
yeah.
So I know you've got a podcast yourself, and that you do with your partner. So you might, let us know what it's about and why you started it.
For sure. Well, we started a podcast because we had been doing a YouTube channel for about 4 years, and everybody asked us when we were making it a podcast, because they wanted to listen to it in their car and not just at their computer. And so that's what we turned the YouTube channel into, a podcast. It's called The Culture Cast. It comes out 3 times a week because we have a lot of YouTube content. And what we've done is taken a lot of the pop culture analysis that we've done. We kind of cut our teeth, as it were, uncovering The Handmaid's Tale and doing episode by episode recaps of that show and The Crown and a delightful Netflix show called Glow. And that's really how we built our audience, and was talking about popular culture, Hallmark Christmas movies we did episodes on, about popular culture from an academic perspective, and how can looking at pop culture through an analytical lens help us be humans better. Because they're just stories, and we all learn about the world through stories. We change our minds through stories. We grow as humans through stories. So we've started talking about them. And so now that's what the podcast is. On Mondays and Fridays, it's the audio feed from a YouTube video that we've done on a pop culture thing. Right now, as you and I are talking, we're covering Disney Plus's series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and having a lot of conversations about what it says about the American military industrial complex, about what it says about trauma, what it says about racism in America, having a lot of those kind of conversations. And then also just flat out, like, we really think the series is cool. So being like, and then that fight scene. So we're nerds overall. And then on Wednesdays, we bring you a more lived culture analysis, which comes from our YouTube lives. We go live on YouTube every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, YouTube and Facebook, to interact with anyone who can join us. And we'll take the audio from that and it becomes the podcast. And those topics are things like, how do I have empathy for people I think are harmful? Why are flags so important to people? What exactly is Brexit? We've talked about how do I have a relationship with somebody who's hurt me? Things like that. We unpack a lot of that more from, again, our academic and analytical perspective. My PhD is in sociology and hers is in history and anthropology. And so really what we're taught at a world-class research institution was how to analyze culture. Beyond that, I also have a master's in social work. And so we kind of combine all of this academic and real life training to try to help people see the world a little bit differently. So the podcast is called The Culture Cast. Again, it's out 3 times a week. They're around a half an hour, but I can't lie. Sometimes we waffle on for a little bit longer than that. But all of them are also attached to videos if people would rather watch. Everything is both YouTube and the podcast. There are things on YouTube that don't make the podcast. We have some more difficult conversations sometimes about colonization, for instance, and those we really want to have visual aids with. And so we ask you to join us on YouTube. But that's why we have the pod, is because people asked us to do one. So we said, okay, we didn't know how to do it. So we hired somebody. Very important step in this process. Technology scared the living like garbage out of us. So we hired an incredibly brilliant woman named Eleanor, who does all of the back-end tech for our YouTube and all the back-end tech for our podcast. And that's why we now have a podcast, is because we now have an Eleanor.
And it's interesting actually, because with both, because there's a lot of people, they prefer the audio, and there's other people, and hence why I do what I mean. I don't promote the video that much, and it's not massive, but yet people like it, and in the odd time it'll do very well. And I haven't figured out that algorithm yet, because I've tried everything. And I just, for yourself, on not only on the podcast but on your business as well, like, because I like talking to people now about the social media, because we seem to be all bamboozled with this. So there's 2,000,003 different things that you've. There's probably a new one coming out next week, you know. So.
Yeah, I just heard somebody was like, we're going to be on Fireside. I was like, I don't know what that is. And I'm just rejecting that for right now. Like, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a thing about the YouTube algorithm that we've learned is that no one actually knows it. And like nobody knows it. And part of it's because Google owns them and they mess with the algorithm whenever they feel like it. So all that we know for sure is that if you have an active YouTube presence, you show up higher in Google searches. And that YouTube videos show up higher in Google searches than any other kind of video. So we know that for sure. How you actually build a following, I mean, honestly, anybody's guess. We did an experiment one week where we asked 4 different YouTube experts how they would grow our channel. And we got like 2.5 different answers, wildly different answers. We're like, okay, so we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing because this works for us and everything else is stressful. But yeah, I mean, it's a crapshoot. I've decided to stop chasing subscribers, listeners, and followers. And we just show up and we are who we are, and they'll find us. And that may or may not jive with somebody's social media strategy for us, but it's the only way I know how to sleep at night and not like lose my mind over my follower count, is I just show up and serve. Erin shows up and serves. We do it together and apart. And then people find us when they want to. And the only outreach I do actually at this point, to be completely honest, is I spend a lot of time on Clubhouse. which is an audio app I adore and find a lot of resonance in. And then I do spend a decent amount of time asking people to be on their podcast if I really love their podcast and I think I can serve their audience. And so those are kind of the only 2 outreaches I do at this point. Everything else is just, let's see what it works, because they change them so much. They just change them so much. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a different one all the time that somebody tells me I have to be on. And I'm like, okay.
I hear you. And I actually had a listener who's from the Polish podcast, somebody that has something like 7 million reached out and basically, he said, look, I love what you're doing. And he gave me I suppose nearly an hour where we were talking and he was explaining all the different stuff. And I think it was TubeBuddy that he said to use, and I got it. And it was like, I can't even remember, you pay $7 a month or something like that. So I said, grand. And then when you go into it, you realize, okay, you need something else. So then you have to upgrade it. And I said, I'm spending hours on this thing and I'm not even putting it out now because I'm conscious that I want to do it right about all the tags and that you put in the headline and everything. Whereas before I just put it out and put a nice picture or something like that. And I think you're dead right that, just get it out there. Those that need it will find it. And
yeah,
because
there's some things to do, like definitely edit it. Don't, definitely do like the basics, but beyond the basics, I think we're all making it up as we go along.
Yeah. And you see, the thing is we're up against, say, the likes of Jay Shetty, a load of these different people. They've got
massive teams, and
they know exactly, and they're just pumping out, and they have the money. They're pumping massive money, to get the millions. And then people think, oh, I don't have millions of followers. What's going on here? And it's not about that. I mean, I'm not sure about yourself and your part, but I know I do kind of shows weekly with a friend of mine on the Awakening podcast, and we said if one person benefited from our conversation, would we still do it? We said yes.
Oh, for sure. We totally believe that. We have one wonderful friend of ours who shows up every single live. And after every live, she tells us what she learned. And it's our, like, if no one else ever showed up, but Jay is kind enough to tell us what she learned that week, like, we're totally chuffed. We think it's the greatest thing in the world. And we have really good engagement from our YouTube community, and they're wonderful. And we're very, very lucky. And we've got some really great engagement on Instagram since I've gotten active on Clubhouse. But no matter how big we get, I'm using air quotes for people or inverted commas for anybody on the audio feed, no matter how many followers we have, legitimately for us, our entire goal in life is to change how people think. We're academics, we're professors, we're educators, we're teachers, pick a word. But what we really want to do is help you think in a different way, see the world a little bit differently, maybe widen it a little bit so that doing life with other people isn't maybe as stressful. And that we can all do this. None of us know how to human. We didn't come with an instruction manual. We're all bumbling along and figuring it out as we go along. So let's figure it out together. So for us, that's also very hard to measure. So like, we'll have coaches that are like, well, how do you measure your engagement? I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm telling people to shift how they think about diversity. They're not going to like tick that on an Instagram follow. So I have to also do the work of like, have we shown up and served? Cool. That's all we can measure. Because I can't measure mind change. I don't teach algorithm manipulation. I teach mental growth. And so we deeply value feedback, especially positive, because we do often feel like we're shouting into the void. And so we deeply value the people that are like, hey, I really loved that point. And we even more value the people that are like, I liked that, but that didn't work for me, so that we can keep refining and what's going on. I think we're on our 8th tagline at this point now, and we've only been doing this for 5 years. So we're very, very conscious that there are things that the current business landscape of social media does not allow us to know.
Excellent. I think I need to sue my mother because she didn't give me an instruction manual when she gave birth to me.
Seriously, what's going on? The audacity.
Exactly. And with Clubhouse, because I got into that when it came out first, and you can be sucked down the rabbit hole of time with that. Yeah, like I'm not sure what your thoughts are and how long you've been involved, but like, it was very good at one stage, especially for podcasting. There was people giving loads of advice and tips, and you go into the different rooms. But then I felt it kind of dropped a bit, the caliber dropped, and there was a lot of kind of trolling there. And I thought, and people just waffling. You go into a room that were supposed to be on a certain topic, and they just go off topic into just chatting away. And I found, so I haven't been in it for a while, but I know that if you put the energy into it, it's the same with, I think TikTok as well. You can build that if you stick to the topic instead of hopping all over the place and having, 5-10 different things that you're talking about constantly. But if you stick to something that you're doing, then you build that audience on that. And I think with the Clubhouse as well, like that, if you you'll find the right groups, but it is hard to actually hit the sweet spot with Clubhouse.
Oh, I completely agree. And I've been on it. I've been on it since April and active since the end of May. And I would say I've gone through like a couple iterations of groups of people I follow. And I'm very happy that now that the people that I follow, I only follow about 500 people. And so active on Clubhouse, that probably means I follow about 100. And they all kind of follow each other in a couple different pockets. So I've got a really great podcast pocket of people who are legitimately like audio engineers giving great audio tips, but also, let's talk about how hard it is to interview somebody who doesn't know how to hold a conversation, and like, how do we do all of that? So I've got that pocket, and then I've got another really great pocket of public speakers. I co-mod a public speaking room every single weeknight, Eastern Standard Time, on how to get on a TEDx stage. And I kind of run with the same 30 people that, do that. And then another kind of group of people that are having really fascinating and great conversations about business. And so those are kind of the pockets that I run in, those 3 pockets. And I will leave a room so fast if somebody starts talking about something I don't care about. Like I don't care if I'm modding the room. I will be like, hey, we're going to either cut this off and get it back on topic, or I'm out, because this isn't what this is for. So I found the other people that agree with me and that are as fierce about how we use Clubhouse as they are. I don't wander into random rooms anymore very often, unless I have insomnia and I just want company at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I get invited to a lot of rooms I never go to. I don't mod with people, co-moderate with people I don't know. I'm very, very fierce with those things. And because of that, I'm on Clubhouse probably 12 hours a week, and all of them are valuable. And so but yeah, that in terms of, they've opened it up to everybody now. So yes, there are a million trolls. I won't bring people up on stage to speak unless they have a social media linked in their bio and something in their biography, because we'll have people come up on stage and just start screaming obscenities and like, cool, You're blocked. That's fine. But I made sure that I'm with fellow moderators that agree with me. So like, they're not going to let people up that aren't human persons. Who are there to have a conversation. So just like every app, I was at the very beginning of Twitter too, where like, it's really good at the beginning and then it's crap for a little while. And then once you learn how to use it, it can be really good for you again. And I think that's the part that Clubhouse is in right now. And it's not for everybody, for sure. If you're not an audio learner, then it's not going to be for you. But for me, it's a podcast that talks back. So it's a podcast I get to talk to. So I love it. It works really well for me. My partner will never go on it. It would be her nightmare. But it works really well for me.
I think that's great advice, what you said and how you do it. And just for people that don't really know about it, is the people that you follow. So you, as you say, you kind of get your circle that you can then go into your friends list and it'll tell you what room they're in.
Yep.
So, so if it's a podcast, as you say, someone that's normally podcasting, he's in a group, he could be a moderator, and it's easy to find a decent room by just going through the people that you're following. Yeah. So no, that makes a lot of sense. Now, there's one thing that I haven't heard of before, and I wanted to discuss with you. You're a member of Forbes Business Council. What's that about?
Yes, sir.
Ooh, that sounds very posh.
It probably is. But no, it's an honor. It's an honor to be a part of it, honestly, because Forbes, who everybody knows, right? So Forbes, the big business magazine, they have these councils around coaching and entrepreneurship and leadership and business and some other kind of stuff. And they select a couple of us who are thought leaders in that area and put us all together. And we put out a lot of content. We answer the questions that people are asking, and we kind of do it together. And so this is a way to, it's Forbes saying that I know what I'm talking about, which is an incredible honor to have Forbes say that I'm a thought leader in the area of people and business and how do we do the business of people. But it's also a great opportunity for me, as far as I'm concerned, to serve other folks, because my reach is a lot bigger now. And so I get to say something I think is really important, and Forbes is the one that publishes it. And so it's not just on my LinkedIn, it's on Forbes. And so that's really nice. You have to be nominated, and I was by somebody that I trust deeply. And then once you're accepted, you're kind of in this cohort of other thought leaders, as it were, and people who are very good at their jobs. And so I was incredibly humbled to be nominated, and also incredibly humbled to be selected.
Excellent, excellent. I would love to kind of go down the kind of different things that you're talking on, but I know we'd go into hours. So I'm not sure, maybe we just touch on one, like the mental health, because I think it's something, and that we'll kind of wrap it up with that, because I don't want to extend an hour, but the mental health, I believe it kind of affects everybody.
Yes. Yeah, I know when, as people, we decided that your brain and your body weren't connected. And it's like, before the arrival of Christ, like we've thought that for a really long time. And we got even more intense with it during the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, that we can separate parts of our bodies from other. And so we started talking about health versus mental health, and health, versus spiritual health versus, other kinds of health. We started pretending we could segment those things. And just like you can't, this malarkey about like keeping your home life at home and not bringing it to work, which has never been true, like never. You always bring your emotions with you wherever you go. I like to think that we're in an international conversation now, but understanding that we don't need to say mental health, we can just say health, and we mean someone's whole person. And that you can't have a physically healthy body and a very, very unhealthy, toxic brain and still be a healthy person. That's not kind of how this works. It's just not how we're built. And so I'm not a mental health practitioner. I usually joke I'm a mental health hobbyist, because I have a lot of the tools that professionals have, and I spend a lot of time looking and thinking at it. I've never been a clinical therapist, and nor will I. That's not my calling. But I've been in therapy since I was 8. In and out of it. I've had a lot of different kinds of it, and I love a lot of people who are therapists. So I have some of that lens. I have some of that stuff. And when I listen to people, it's pretty easy at times for me to pick out conversations where, oh, that's really like a deep mental health thing that we could be talking to professionals about. But more than anything, what we see our view as Abbey Research, and then as humans, as both Aaron and Kristen, is to help people transition that thought process from the emotions and mental processes as things that we can separate from the rest of our health schema.
Excellent. So I know we could probably talk for 2 hours on all the different things that you cover, but I'm sure they should go in and listen to your YouTube channel and your podcast. So you might let me know how people can get in contact with you.
Oh my gosh, we would be delighted to have you. Even if you think I've been talking rubbish for the last 45 minutes, we would love to have you and have the conversation. So our company is called Abbey Research, and Abbey is spelled with an E. So it's ABBEY, and then research, like research. So the easiest way to find us is on every social media. We are at Abbey Research. So we're at Abbey Research on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We are not on TikTok because it scares us, but feel free. I do make reels on Instagram, so you can see us in video. The most active places definitely are YouTube, which is youtube.com/Abbey Research. As long as you spell Abbey with an E, you'll generally find us.
Excellent. And I'll make sure I put all the links in the podcast description, both on the audio and the video, because you do both, and so do I. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com, on BitChute and YouTube. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, a review. It all helps, and share with your friends. Until next week, take care.